The bell rang, and students shuffled into Mr. Whitaker's 8th grade science classroom. The air was thick with anticipation. It was science fair day. Among them was Jaden, a quiet, brilliant 13-year-old black boy, clutching a homemade robotics project built from scrap parts. As Jaden sat up, Mr. Whitaker narrowed his eyes. "Jaden," he said with a mocking grin, "what's this supposed to be? A pile of junk?" Laughter rippled through the classroom. Jaden swallowed hard, replying softly, "It's a robotic hand prototype. It can mimic human motion." Mr. Whitaker chuckled loudly, waving at the class. "See, folks, this is what happens when you watch too much sci-fi and not enough reality." Jaden's face burned. The other students stared, some snickering, some silent. One girl shifted uncomfortably, but said nothing. "Next," Whitaker barked, walking past. Jaden stood frozen, holding back tears. His invention twitched, alive, misunderstood, and humiliated in plain sight. Jaden walked down the hallway in silence, his project hugged tightly to his chest. Posters of academic success lined the walls, none of which featured anyone who looked like him. His footsteps echoed against the linoleum floor. The humiliation from earlier clung to him like a second skin. He passed by groups of students whispering, their eyes grazing him before turning away. At his locker he stared into the metal void, lost in thought. "Why do I even try?" he whispered. His fingers trembled as he placed the robotic hand inside, gently like it was something sacred. From behind him, a soft voice said, "I thought it was cool." Jaden turned, surprised, but the girl was already walking away. That single sentence pierced through the fog of shame. It wasn't validation, but it was hope. A seed. Something to hold on to. The school bus ride home was silent. Jaden sat by the window, forehead against the glass, watching raindrops chase each other down the pane. His project rested in his backpack, slightly bent. Kids behind him laughed about something unrelated, but each sound felt like an echo of Whitaker's voice. "Pile of junk." It played over and over in his head. His hands clenched into fists on his lap. Through the fogged glass, he saw cracked sidewalks, empty lots, and boarded-up storefronts roll by, places that always told him what he couldn't be. But somewhere, under all that shame, his mind buzzed. Circuits, child door, motors, well, code. He imagined improvements, enhancements, defenses. Maybe it wasn't over. Not yet. Jaden's mom looked up from the kitchen table as the door creaked open. Her eyes scanned his face instantly. No words were needed. She saw everything. "Bad day?" she asked gently. Jaden nodded, dropping his bag and sitting across from her. She placed a warm hand over his. "They don't get to tell you who you are," she said. "You hear me?" He nodded again, fighting tears. "You built something beautiful, even if they didn't see it." Jaden whispered, "It's not fair." His mother sighed. "Fair's a luxury, baby, but truth, that's yours. They can't take it." He stared at her, then slowly pulled out the robotic hand. It twitched again, and for the first time all day, Jaden smiled. A spark in the dark. That night, Jaden sat at his bedroom desk, his room dimly lit by a desk lamp. Tools scattered beside notebooks, filled with sketches and diagrams. He adjusted a wire on the robotic hand, watching it respond with sharper, cleaner motion. The mockery still echoed in his head, but quieter now, replaced by determination. He scribbled notes faster than ever, ideas flowing like electricity. Enhancements, wireless control, AI, feedback. He looked up at the ceiling. "I'll show them," he whispered. "I'll show the world." He wasn't just fixing the machine. He was rebuilding himself, piece by piece, code by code. Jaden didn't need their permission. He only needed time. Jaden stood beneath the tall brick walls of the local community library, his backpack slung low and heavy, not just with weight, but with yesterday's pain. Inside, the silence wrapped around him like armor. The scent of old paper and polished wood brought comfort. He made his way to the science and technology section, where dusty books on robotics sat untouched. Sitting cross-legged on the floor, he flipped open a volume on advanced mechanical motion, his eyes lighting up. Page after page, he devoured knowledge, the sting of Mr. Whitaker's words fading with each diagram. An elderly librarian peeked around the corner, watching him with curious eyes. She smiled. "Most kids don't touch those," she said. Jayden looked up surprised. "I'm not most kids," he replied quietly. For the first time in a long time, he felt seen, not for what they thought he was, but for what he truly could be. As Jayden buried his nose in a diagram of servo motors, a soft voice interrupted. "You know what that's called?" He looked up to see a man in his late 50s, tall, black, wearing glasses and a NASA sweatshirt. Jayden nodded shyly. "A linear actuator." The man smiled. "Smart. Most adults don't know that." Jayden's eyes widened. "You work at NASA?" The man chuckled. "Used to. Now, I build mines, not rockets." He introduced himself as Mr. Rowland, a retired aerospace engineer who volunteered at the library. "Show me what you're working on," he said, pulling up a chair. Jayden hesitated, then opened his notebook. Rowland's eyes scanned the sketches, nodding. "You've got something special here, Jayden. Don't let the world tell you otherwise." For the first time, Jayden heard validation from someone who'd already done what he dreamed of. A door had opened, and this time, someone was holding it for him. Energized by Rowland's encouragement, Jayden asked about a regional STEM contest he saw online. Rowland helped him prepare the application, writing his essay with care. But days later, Jayden walked into school and found a red slip on his locker. "Application denied, ineligible." Confused and frustrated, he approached Mr. Whitaker. "You didn't meet the criteria," the teacher said flatly. "Stick to the school fare next time." Jayden stared at him. "What criteria?" Whitaker shrugged. "Not everything is meant for everyone." That night, Jayden showed Rowland the slip. The older man's jaw tightened. "He never even submitted this," Rowland muttered. Jayden felt his chest sink. Why would he do that? Rowland's answer came quietly. "Because people like him are afraid of people like you succeeding." The injustice ignited something deeper in Jayden, not rage but resolve. If doors wouldn't open for him, he'd build his own. The school emptied at 4 p.m., but Jayden stayed behind. In a forgotten corner of the science lab, he worked alone, tinkering, testing, reworking circuits with tools borrowed from Mr. Rowland. The building groaned with age, floors creaking as janitors passed by. Jayden sat on the floor beside a disassembled robot, his hoodie stained with grease, a lamp clamped to a desk above him. Each movement was precise, each wire stripped with care. Mr. Rowland entered quietly, holding a bag of snacks. "Dinner break," he said. Jayden shook his head. "Can't stop now." Rowland knelt beside him. "Don't burn out proving yourself to people who won't ever see you." Jayden looked up. "I'm not doing it for them anymore." Rowland smiled. That was the shift. Jayden wasn't chasing validation now. He was chasing vision. Back in his bedroom, Jayden pinned a fresh sheet to his wall, a new blueprint. Not just for the robotic hand, but something bigger. A fully articulated limb that could respond to thought patterns. He'd been reading up on neural networks, machine learning, prosthetics. His desk was now a jungle of books, parts, and wires. The insult from Mr. Whitaker was no longer pain, it was fuel. Jayden whispered into the dim light. "They tried to shut me down, but they just lit me up." On his desk, a small prototype arm flexed its fingers. Outside, the world slept. But inside that room, genius was wide awake, sketching the future. Jayden ran up the steps 2 at a time, his heart pounding. The envelope was thick, official, embossed with the logo of the National Young Innovators Program. He ripped it open at his bedroom desk. The words hit hard. "We regret to inform you." His hands trembled. He read it again and again. It wasn't just a rejection. It was silence after weeks of hope. He had met every requirement. His prototype worked. Mr. Rowland had reviewed every word of his application. Jaden sat back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. "Why does this keep happening?" he whispered. He didn't cry this time. He clenched his jaw. Rejections were beginning to stack higher than encouragements. But that didn't mean he was wrong. It meant the system was blind. Jaden stood up, took the letter, and pinned it next to his blueprint. It was no longer a rejection. It was motivation. Jaden sat quietly in the classroom, sketching neural feedback loops in the margins of his math homework. Mr. Whitaker passed by, glancing down. "Still playing mad scientist, huh?" he muttered under his breath. Jaden didn't look up. "I applied to the state STEM championship," he said. Mr. Whitaker laughed aloud. "You?" The classroom fell silent. "That's for real contenders, not hobbyists with trash bin projects." Jaden's grip tightened on his pencil. After class, he overheard Whitaker speaking with another teacher. "That kid? No way he gets in. I made sure of that." Jaden stood just outside the door, frozen. The rage didn't burn outward. It buried itself deep. But this time, it wouldn't break him. It would focus him. He would earn his way in, even if someone had to drag the truth out of the shadows. That evening, Jaden sat beside Mr. Rowland in the library, visibly shaken. He recounted everything. Whitaker's words, the rejection, the whispers. Rowland didn't flinch. He simply stood, walked to the front desk, and made a call. "I'd like to speak to the regional director of the state STEM program," he said firmly. The librarian raised her eyebrows. Jaden watched, breath held. Rowland paced as he explained who he was, who Jaden was, and what had been done. If a student is denied based on the prejudice of an educator, that's not rejection, it's sabotage. When he hung up, he turned to Jaden. "You're going to that competition, one way or another." Jaden's mouth opened slightly. "Why are you doing this?" Rowland smiled. "Because someone once did it for me. Now it's my turn." That night, something powerful settled in Jaden's chest. He wasn't alone in this fight. The next week, Jaden received an official email. "Congratulations. You've been selected as a finalist for the state STEM championship." He stared at the screen in disbelief. "They said yes," he whispered. At school, he printed the email and posted it on his locker. Mr. Whitaker passed by, jaw tight, but said nothing. Jaden met his gaze, calm, unflinching. Word spread. Some students looked impressed. Others confused. But the energy shifted. Jaden was no longer invisible. Later that day, Rowland handed him a new toolkit. "You're in. Time to level up." Jaden opened the case. Precision sensors, a microprocessor board, new servos. His fingers moved instinctively, planning his next design. No more asking to be seen. No more permission. He was building his future now, and no one was going to erase him from it. Jaden arrived at the STEM competition venue, a sprawling university tech building, buzzing with talent. Students wheeled in robots, drones, and massive display boards. Jaden rolled his suitcase quietly, nerves fluttering in his stomach. Around him, others had polished uniforms, corporate sponsorships, and elite school badges. He had none of that. Just his invention and his grit. Inside, judges made notes. Cameras flashed. Tech journalists interviewed select students. Jaden found his booth and began setting up. His design was different, unrefined maybe, but alive. As he connected the robotic limb to his laptop, it moved smoothly, fluidly. A nearby contestant paused, watching. "Did you make that yourself?" Jaden nodded. "Every piece." She gave a respectful nod. "Looks legit." That one word, legit, meant more than any trophy. He belonged here. No one could deny it now. As Jaden tightened the final servo on his project, he overheard a conversation behind the curtain. A judge flipping through papers muttered, "Whitaker flagged this kid last year. Said he plagiarized parts of a bill." Jaden froze. His heart slammed against his ribs. Whitaker had lied. And not just once. He tried to bury Jayden's name before he ever had a chance. Jayden stepped back, hands trembling. How many others had he done this to? How long had his teacher been trying to erase him from the future he was fighting for? That night in the dorms, Jayden asked Roland, "Why would someone do that?" Roland's eyes were heavy. "Because if they admit you're brilliant, they have to admit they were wrong, and some folks will do anything to avoid that." Jayden didn't cry. He just stared at his invention. "Then let's make it impossible to ignore." Roland returned later with a file in his hand. "I did some digging," he said quietly. Inside were old faculty memos, emails, evidence that Mr. Whitaker had blocked students of color from advanced programs for years. "He's been at this a long time," Roland said grimly. Jayden flipped through the papers. A turn d'attoir. A legacy of erasure. Roland placed a hand on his shoulder. "You're not just building a machine, Jayden. You're building a reason for the world to change." Jayden took a deep breath. "We need to expose this." Roland nodded. "After you show them what brilliance looks like." Jayden looked down at his robotic limb, wires glowing, mechanisms shifting like muscle. His project wasn't just science anymore. It was proof. It was truth with gears and code. And the world was about to witness it. Roland leaned back in the chair, his eyes distant. "You know," he said slowly, "your father was in my engineering cohort. One of the best." Jayden blinked. "My dad?" Roland nodded. "He designed biofeedback algorithms for prosthetics, way ahead of his time." Jayden's heart pounded. "But he never talked about it." Roland looked down. "He didn't get the credit. A colleague stole his work. He left the field, raised you instead." Jayden sat in silence. His hands slowly reached for the prototype. "He built this dream before I even knew it existed," he whispered. Roland placed a weathered blueprint on the table, Jayden's father's early sketches. "Finish what he started." Jayden felt the weight of generations, not as a burden, but as power. He wasn't just chasing innovation. He was restoring a legacy. The next morning, Jayden stepped onto the exhibition floor like a storm ready to break. At his booth, he unveiled the final prototype, an AI-integrated robotic limb that responded to muscle motion and neural input. The judges circled. The crowd gathered. The room dimmed slightly as Jayden activated the interface. A screen displayed his arm movements, syncing flawlessly with the robotic hand. Gasps followed. The hand flexed, gripped, and adapted to changes in pressure. This isn't undergraduate work," one judge whispered. "This is advanced bioengineering." Jayden explained every detail, terms, process, purpose. He wasn't just impressing them. He was educating them. And this time, no one could dismiss what they saw with their own eyes. Mr. Whitaker, watching from the audience, sat frozen. His silence was louder than applause. As the demonstration ended, the room erupted in applause. Not polite. Not obligatory. Genuine. Several judges stood clapping. One offered his card. Another asked about a patent. Jayden stood straight, calm but glowing. He looked out into the audience and locked eyes with Whitaker, who stood slowly, then turned and walked away without a word. That moment wasn't about revenge. It was about reclamation. Jayden had made them see what he saw all along. Later, at the awards announcement, Jayden didn't care if he won. He had already claimed something more important: visibility, respect, truth. But when they called his name for first prize, it still made his knees weak. He walked to the stage, holding the robotic limb high, a living symbol of defiance and brilliance. The room had changed. And so had he. The next morning, Jayden's name was trending. News outlets ran headlines like 13-year-old invents next-gen prosthetic and STEM prodigy breaks barriers. Interviews flooded in. He sat beside Mr. Roland at a coffee shop, stunned as the local news station played footage of his presentation. "Feels surreal," Jaden whispered. Roland smiled. You earned every second of it. But success came with attention. And questions. One journalist asked if he really built it alone. Another probed for help from older engineers. Jaden kept his tone even. Every line of code, every circuit, mine. Still, doubt lingered in some faces. Even brilliance couldn't erase all bias. Yet Jaden didn't let it show. He spoke with clarity, with power. He had stopped fighting for recognition. Now he was leading it. He wasn't just in the spotlight. He was owning it. When Jaden returned to school, the hallways buzzed. Students looked up from their phones, whispering. Some offered high fives. Others avoided eye contact. Mr. Whitaker stood by the faculty office, arms crossed. Big win, he said flatly. Jaden nodded, unfazed. It wasn't about winning. Whitaker scoffed. Well, don't let it go to your head. Jaden stared back calmly. You said I didn't belong there, but I do. And I always did. The teacher didn't reply. Just walked away, shoulders tighter than before. Later that day, the school principal asked Jaden to join the innovation showcase on behalf of the school. The irony wasn't lost on him. They'd ignored his talent until the world forced them to see it. Still, Jaden accepted. Not to prove anything, but to make space for whoever came next. That evening, Jaden sat at the kitchen table across from his mother. The first place medal lay on the table, next to his robotic hand. She didn't cry. She didn't yell with joy. She just reached over, held his hand and said, You're becoming the man your father always hoped you'd be. Jaden's throat tightened. I didn't know about what he built, about what happened to him. She nodded, tears welling. He let it go to protect you. But now you've brought it all back. And more. They sat in silence for a long moment, the kind filled with deep understanding. I'm proud of you, she said. Jaden nodded, barely whispering, Me too. That night, he framed both the blueprint of his father's design and his own beside it. One story built upon another, unfinished until now. Weeks later, Jaden stood in a towering tech building downtown, this time as a guest speaker. The audience included scientists, CEOs, college students. Jaden adjusted the mic, heart steady. They told me I wasn't ready, that I didn't belong. But I'm here, not because of the system, but in spite of it. The crowd was silent, hanging on every word. I built my first prototype with spare parts and doubts. But brilliance doesn't require permission. It requires persistence. Cameras flashed. Applause roared. As he left the stage, several students approached, young, wide-eyed, mostly kids of color. How do we start? One asked. Jaden smiled. You already have. You just need to keep going. In that moment, he didn't just feel seen, he felt needed. A builder of blueprints not just for machines but for futures. Back in his room, Jaden laid out a massive sheet of paper across his wall. The blueprint wasn't just a machine, it was a plan for a mentorship program. Project Insight, he labeled it, designed to help students from underfunded schools access tools, knowledge, and guidance. Mr. Roland helped with logistics. Local sponsors offered funding. Teachers reached out, some with guilt, others with awe. Jaden replied to every message, every question. He wasn't interested in being a symbol. He wanted to be a bridge. On one side was who he had been. On the other, who he could help others become. He stood back and looked at the wall. Designs, code, faces of kids reaching out. It wasn't just about beating the system anymore. It was about rewriting it. And he had just begun. Jaden's project gained national traction. A tech magazine listed him in their top 10 innovators under 18. But success stirred resistance. Online forums accused him of faking the build. Anonymous commenters questioned his intellect. No way a 13-year-old kid made that alone, they typed. Affirmative action pick. Jaden stared at the screen, the same burning shame returning, disguised as doubt. Roland saw the look in his eyes. You don't owe them silence, Jaden, but you also don't owe them your peace. Jaden closed the laptop. I'll let my work speak. He began recording a behind-the-scenes video, code, prototypes, journal pages. He published it with no speech, no dramatic music. Just truth. The backlash didn't disappear, but something shifted. The world began to see him for who he really was. Not a headline, not a symbol, but a builder, a mind, a voice. A week later, Jaden returned to school for a student assembly. He didn't expect what came next. Mr. Whitaker stood at the podium, clearing his throat. Today, we recognize a student who proved us wrong, me included. The room went still. Jaden not only succeeded, he led, and I failed to see it. Murmurs echoed. Jaden, sitting in the back row, was frozen. Whitaker glanced his way. Just a moment. He deserves more than applause. He deserves support. It wasn't a full apology, but it was a crack in a wall Jaden had spent years pushing against. As he stepped onto the stage to accept a new scholarship plaque, he wasn't smiling for Mr. Whitaker. He was smiling for every kid who'd ever been told they weren't enough. The stage was his now, not because it was given, but because he'd claimed it. Jaden stepped into his sleek private tech lab, clean lines, humming equipment, white walls glowing with screens and sensors. He had been invited for a summer research collaboration with one of the country's top robotics institutions. Scientists greeted him with respect. "You're the one behind the neural motion rig," one said. Jaden nodded, eyes scanning every inch of the space like a kid in a candy store. He saw tools he'd only dreamed of. But it wasn't the tech that stunned him. It was that no one here questioned if he belonged. He sat at a workbench, surrounded by graduate students twice his age. "What do you want to build next?" one asked. Jaden paused, then grinned. "A full limb that learns from the user, not just mimics." They didn't laugh. They started sketching. Finally, a space where his vision didn't need defending. Back in the community library, Jaden sat across from a small group of middle schoolers. "When I started, all I had was broken parts and a lot of questions," he said. The kids leaned in, wide-eyed. One boy raised his hand. "What if people tell you you're not smart enough?" Jaden smiled gently. "Then you build it anyway. Not to prove them wrong, but to prove yourself right." Behind them, Mr. Rowland watched quietly, pride in his eyes. The room that once gave Jaden his first glimpse of power had now become the cradle of his legacy. He handed a girl a small microchip kit. "This is how I began," he said. She held it like treasure. In that moment, the blueprint grew again, not on paper, but in possibility. A spark had passed from one mind to many. One quiet morning, Jaden checked the mailbox and found a thick envelope. The logo read, "Future Global Scientists Initiative." He opened it slowly, hands steady. "We are pleased to offer you early admission into the 2028 Research Fellowship Program. A full scholarship. International mentorship. Resources beyond imagination." Wait. He walked into the kitchen and handed the letter to his mom. She read it silently, then pulled him into a tight hug. "He would have been so proud," she whispered, voice cracking. Jaden nodded against her shoulder. Later, alone in his room, he taped the letter beside his father's blueprint. Then he placed a note under it in his own handwriting. "The system didn't give me this. We built it ourselves." There were no more locked doors. Only paths waiting to be walked, and walls waiting to be rewritten. Years later, the lab was quiet except for the hum of processors and the soft whir of mechanical limbs. Now 23, Jaden stood before a panel of scientists and international press. The headline on the screen behind him read, "NeuroSync, a leap in human-machine integration." His voice was confident, calm. "This is a full feedback limb, not just reactive, but adaptive. It learns from the user. It evolves." Cameras flashed. Applause erupted. His once crude robotic hand had become the foundation for life-changing prosthetics. But Jaden didn't pause for praise. As the room cleared, he walked to a small private corner of the lab. Framed on the wall were three things: his father's blueprint, his childhood prototype, and a photo of his mom and Roland. It wasn't about legacy. It was about becoming the person they always saw in him, long before the world did. After the event, Jaden sat in a university classroom, not as a student, but as a mentor. Before him were a dozen bright-eyed teenagers, many from backgrounds like his. One girl raised her hand. "How did you know you'd make it?" Jaden smiled. "I didn't. I just refused to quit." He walked to the whiteboard, drawing a diagram of early signal mapping. As he explained, he noticed the same spark he once had, confused but hungry to learn, in every face. "You don't need anyone's permission to be brilliant," he said. "You just need opportunity. And when you get it, you make more of it." Laughter. Nods. Scribbled notes. The classroom had changed since his own days in school, but the fight for recognition hadn't. Now Jaden was making sure fewer kids had to fight alone. Jaden returned one evening to the now quiet halls of his old middle school. It hadn't changed much. Same chipped lockers, same flickering lights. He paused outside Mr. Whitaker's former classroom. The door was closed. Empty. No name on the placard. Jaden entered anyway. It was silent, stripped down. Just rows of desks and the faint echo of old moments. He walked to the desk where he once stood humiliated, placed a small engraved plate on it: Jaden Ingram, STEM Innovator, 2030. Not as a boast, but as a reminder to whoever came next. "This space doesn't get to define you," he whispered. "You do." And with that he turned and left, not angry, not triumphant, but free. A full circle closed with quiet power. From the observation deck of an international space research station, Jaden looked up at the stars. NeuroSync was now part of a joint NASA-ESA Prosthetics in Space initiative. Zero-gravity performance testing had gone perfectly. His design, born from rejection and recycled parts, was now orbiting Earth. A young astronaut floated nearby, adjusting the limb. "Can't believe this came from a kid's bedroom," he joked. Jaden laughed softly. "Neither could my teacher." The stars outside shimmered like blueprints of possibility. Jaden reached for the glass palm against space. "You never know where the smallest sparks will lead," he whispered. "But you light them anyway." Behind him, a digital display read, "Mission Insight, status, active, full circle, full flight." The camera fades in on Jaden, sitting in a quiet studio. A documentary crew finishes wrapping up. "Last question," the interviewer says. "If you could speak to your 13-year-old self back in that classroom, what would you say?" Jaden looks down, hands folded. He takes a breath. "I'd say, they're going to try and make you small. Don't let them." He looks up, directly into the camera. "The world doesn't need another genius who fits in. It needs one who refuses to." Fade to black. Over the silence, his voice continues, "You're not the project they mocked. You're the blueprint they never saw coming."